working for an agency is the biggest career hack that you could possibly do. Once you come out of that pressure cooker into an in-house role, you realize that you're so far ahead of where you would be if you worked in just an in-house role.
Welcome back to Horizons podcast, where I convince marketing leaders to share their secrets with the rest of us. Today, I have Steven Stouffer. Steven is Director of Automation Solutions at Tray.ai, and he has over a decade of experience in MarCops, RevOps, and digital transformation. He started his career as a web developer before moving into various marketing technology roles, both in-house and in agency. And he's particularly known for his work in marketing automation and in AI implementation. Steven, welcome to the Stow.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a journey. It's been exciting to kind of see the technology change, but I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's start at the beginning. You started your career as a CSS and HTML person at Lane Gainer Sports. What got you into that?
Yeah, it was straight out of actually, it was a little before high school that I started to work basically in a shop to put together sporting goods equipment. So if you can picture little Steven pre high school putting together sporting goods equipment, and I was actually in the shop. I had nothing to do with technology, and then the CEO would constantly have issues with the printer, the network and stuff, and then I would always offer to help. And then slowly I made my way into the office, and then I started working on the website, and then it was an e-commerce site, so updating inventory and making changes to the site. And then that was my introduction to technology. So funny enough, I fell into marketing automation, and I accidentally fell into, I guess, web development too.
It's incredible. Isn't it interesting how just saying yes to things and being available can open so many paths of curiosity?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the hallmark of any good marketing ops, sales ops, revenue ops person, is just someone who's curious and willing to say yes when everyone says no.
Facts.
Yeah.
And then we met a couple of years later at College Plus.
Yeah.
I was doing accounting at the time. You were doing marketing. What led you into marketing at College Plus?
I wasn't doing marketing. So when you talk about falling into things, I never had a marketing role or background when I joined College Plus. I was the front end engineer with a couple of years experience of doing front end development for the sporting goods company. I had no SaaS, no tech, no really anything experience. So when I got that internship, it is an introduction to Pardot. So at the time, Brandon Ashton, he was over Pardot. And then I came in as basically his intern. So he introduced me to Pardot, introduced me kind of data analysis, introduction to Salesforce, because I never even touched Salesforce at the time. And then when Brandon ended up leaving the company, here you go. You are now the owner of Pardot. And I'm just the typical accidental admin, didn't really want it, ended up with it, and then of course fell in love with it and just stuck with it ever since.
I feel like a lot of people do not fall in love with automation of marketing. What led you to actually fall in love with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I love solving puzzles. And I feel like when you're doing marketing automation, it's getting the person from point A to point B, right? From getting them from the website, getting them into the tool, which at the time seemed complicated, forms and validation and, getting the right requests and errors and all of that stuff. So I love the puzzle there. And then also anyone who's done email development know that they can be very tricky with Outlook and the different devices and stuff. And that's kind of a puzzle too, just to get it right. And then systems integrations is kind of where I kind of been following now on the technology side, which is just a big puzzle, working with APIs, getting the play nice, getting the authentications in, it's just one big puzzle, and I love it. So yeah, the minute it stops becoming something to solve and something exciting new every day is probably the day that I'll probably move careers and do something else.
feel like that is unlikely
It's
to come
it's
anytime
not gonna
soon.
no, it's not gonna come anytime. So now we got AI. Now that's the new puzzle that you get to try to solve.
Okay, so I saw on LinkedIn the you built email nurture campaigns at one point when you were at College Plus.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, a decade on, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently if you were to go back in time and rebuild those email campaigns?
Yeah. So I'm gonna answer that question not just for the nurture campaigns, but like seasoned operations person talking to a newbie ops person. And I would probably err on the side of simplification. I think simplifying things is such an art form that you kind of learn just with experience. And then like newbie ops person, I wanted to make, I mean, at one point, I don't know if you remember, I had them printed off on the whiteboard, on the walls. I was like mapping them out like a madman. Like seriously, I felt it probably would have looked like a meme if you would have looked at the marketing board with the at the time it was linear nurture drip programs with Pardot where it went straight down and you could like skip emails and stuff, but it was really complicated to actually map it out. So I'd print it off and I would do it. But like looking back, specifically nurture, since you asked about it, is I would simplify. I would test more basic things and do less like emails because when you do so much, it's hard to keep track of what's working, what's not working. So I would err on the side of simplification and it's good for you because it's less for you to manage and it's easier for you to wrap your head around. It's good for your replacement because they can wrap their head around it. And at the end of the day, it's good for the customer because what the process that they go through is expected and it's not complicated. They can understand it. And, they're not getting 3 emails in one day because you've over engineered the nurture campaigns.
The simplification would broadly mean fewer emails, but more effective emails in
Yeah,
the ones you keep.
maybe not fewer emails, but like higher quality emails. And it also opens the door to being able to A/B test and test variants and see what works and what doesn't work. When at the time I was so busy just pumping out quantity of content, and I very rarely would actually sit back and think of like, okay, A/B testing subject lines. Did it work? Did it not work? Spending more time in like analyzing the data. That was almost like an afterthought back in the day.
And speaking of analyzing data,
Mhm.
that requires generally that you have a decent amount of data. How do you think, in a relatively small scale like we were at that time, how much is the minimum you need to really do A/B testing effectively?
I have a lot with like 1,000 records. I think it just depends on how much you're testing and how many variants that you do, right? So like if you don't have a ton of data, A/B testing, just test A, test B, typically can be enough. You work with what you have. Don't go out there and buy data just because you don't have enough of it. But you can test. Or sometimes it is, what, we're going to send one email this week, and we're going to send a little bit different of an email the second week. So you're sending your entire database or what you have 2 different versions over a longer period of time versus if you've got tens of thousands of records, you could split that one email in the same day and just work with that. So you can do a lot with a little. You can get scrappy, but as you matures and you get more and more data, then you can do more complex tests.
That makes sense. Going back to your early experience in front end development,
Mhm.
what do you feel has stuck around in your career that you learned at that time?
Script and CSS. It seems to follow me everywhere. CSS you wouldn't think, but like there's a lot of different tools that allow you to customize the look and feel using CSS, and that's become very handy with me. And then JavaScript is such a helpful language to understand because it's universally almost accepted. So they're advanced languages, like data specific, you got SQL and then you've got like Python, which might be helpful. But like for the average person, like if you're going to learn like a coding language or a development language, I would say JavaScript would probably be where I would start just because it's full with like regardless of what tool that you use.
Agreed. Agreed. I do a lot of app scripting with Google products, and
Yeah.
JavaScript is basically very similar to
Yeah.
AppScript.
hmm
Do you still write it all yourself?
I do not.
How do you
No.
approach writing today?
ChatGPT. It's I don't know for those who developed in like HTML, but like at the time I would do a lot of HTML and CSS work, and I used Bootstrap. It was like really cool, kind of prepackaged, templatized way to spin up landing pages really easily. ChatGPT is kind of like the AI version of like prepackaged coding languages almost. So it's like a way to basically create something completely from scratch, net new, but without having to burn through the mental calories of doing it yourself. So Python might have something like Panda, and then HTML has something like Bootstrap, and ChatGPT is kind of like the umbrella that covers everything.
And for someone who's not technical, like let's say some of our listeners, they've never written CSS by hand themselves, would they be able to go into ChatGPT and write CSS, or would they need to first learn it themselves?
So I have found that you need to know what the output is that you're looking for in order to kind of QA what's giving you. So like hallucination is a real thing with AI. Like it'll sometimes just go crazy and give you weird stuff. Most of the time with code, I found that it's actually pretty helpful, but you still need to know where that plugs into like the bigger thing, right? So like if it gives you CSS, you still need to know where you put that CSS to not break other stuff. So yes, it'll generate it typically pretty well, but like the fundamentals. So like Code Academy is probably a better place to start than ChatGPT, and then go through a course, understand the fundamentals to your point, and then start dabbling and having ChatGPT, start to write the content or the code.
Well, that's interesting. So you'd recommend if someone's non-technical, go into Code Academy, learn the basics of your language of choice, and then start working with
Yeah, I mean, if you're
ChatGPT.
looking to do code development, absolutely. But if not, like if you're not looking to write code or anything, then you want to start dabbling with ChatGPT. I mean, absolutely jump in right now. And the first thing I would do is I would put in my job title, the company I work for, and then ask it what are the top 10 things that I could use ChatGPT for my day to day, and like start there, and then work your way down the list and dive in a little bit deeper with whatever one looks the most interesting.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good idea.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I feel holds people back on AI, and I think you mentioned this in a previous interview also, is just the creativity to know what's possible. And so that way of asking like, hey, here's my job scope. What should I do with AI is a great way to get around that.
Yeah,
It's wonderful.
absolutely. Like your job title, and then if you're looking for like career development, put in the title that you want, right? Like where are you going in your career? What's the next step? So provide ChatGPT that and say, write me a roadmap to get to this next title. What are the tools and resources that this person should know that I don't know? And then you can start to have it as like an aid to get to that next milestone within your career.
Yes. Going a bit deeper on this AI piece, one of the things I've noticed when I write code with AI is sometimes it's very helpful. Most of the time it's very helpful, but sometimes it takes kind of bad routes to a destination. For example, I built this product a while ago that is kind of like Kudo board, where you can write a note to people, puts all the notes together. And I figured I would like to make something like that so I don't have to pay Kudo board $5 per card or whatever.
Yep.
It was very easy to do with AI. I built a website, it's live, it works. It just has one small problem, which is the AI built a database using JSON rather than actual databasing. And every time you restart the server, it re-ingests the entire JSON string into the live database.
Yeah.
Which is horribly ineffective.
It would be a problem, yeah.
But it's good enough. It gets the job done, so I haven't bothered to change it.
Uh-huh.
How do you recommend someone avoid creating sort of dependencies like this that could cause issues down the road when they're building with AI?
Guess it depends, right? Like, are you looking for a enterprise grade product that needs to scale with 10,000 users? Or like you just said, it's good enough, right? I don't think I can really answer that, except for with experience, you'll be able to identify where you need to be optimizing. And then also, I mean, if you're not sure, you could push your code through OpenAI and say, what other areas for optimization with this code could I do? I actually did that today. I built something similar. I was doing like local storage data on my in the browser with a cookie that was generated of just like when the page loaded, it would auto generate it, and I didn't like it, and I couldn't think of a quick way to optimize it. So I just asked ChatGPT. I said, "Look, it's working this way. This seems horribly ineffective. What's a better way? Give me like 4 ideas of a different way to do this thing." And then it can kind of come up with it. So like from an ideation perspective, it's great. But I feel like with your specific problem, I think just your experience stepped in a little bit and told you that you probably should be concerned about that thing.
Yeah. And I love what you said there. I think for people who are good with AI, like you, it feels very natural. For people who are not used to AI, it can feel like, where do I start? But I
Yeah.
think you mentioned a couple of things, like just going back to the AI and saying, this is my problem. So the thing that feels like, oh, I cannot solve this, just ask AI. That will help to unblock you.
Yeah.
Asking for multiple solutions, give me 4 possibilities. That's a great way to approach it. So these are excellent ways to begin cracking these problems more effectively with AI.
Yeah, and I'd say very rarely does it actually solve my problem perfectly, but it helps you at least get out of the, oh my goodness, like I don't know where I'm going with this. I have no idea what the next step is. Like it can at least get you out of that a little bit and start ideating solutions versus getting so caught up on the problem. It is really helpful in that regard, where it just gets you unstuck.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, switching from AI, something else that's quite distinctive about your career is you've spent a lot of time in-house. You've also spent a lot of time in agency. And I believe you've said that some of the best development you've had personally has come from your agency experience.
Yeah.
What are the differences you've observed between those two environments?
Yeah. So I'll tell everybody, working for an agency is the biggest career hack that you could possibly do. So like if you want exposure to like tons of different tools and people and use cases and companies and different kinds of politics and everything, like you will get a crash course at an agency, which is like it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you get to learn so much in such a short amount of time, and it's a curse because you learn so much in such a short amount of time. And you can go crazy with how much in different tools that you're learning. You don't really feel like you're an expert in any one thing because you're bouncing from tool to company to use case. But like once you come out of that kind of like pressure cooker into an in-house role, you realize that like you're so far ahead of where you would be if you worked in just an in-house role where you only worked with one CRM, one marketing automation tool, one core use case in one industry. For 4 years, you could have learned 6 different CRMs, 6 different marketing automation tools. You could have worked with hundreds of different people. So in my eyes, working at an agency is just invaluable. If you have the opportunity, absolutely do that. Just know that like burning out is real, and you have to set some strict guardrails to make sure that the types of people who will take advantage of your time don't get to do that. Since you're in a very much so like a people-facing, people-pleasing type role.
That is very fair. How do you manage that when you're at an agency? Yeah. There are all these companies that want all of your time. How do you manage their expectations?
Yeah, it's a little bit on like the consultant, and then I'd say it's a lot on leadership. So I was in a leadership role, so I could set the tone for my team, and then I could also step in when I felt like people were being taken advantage of. But learning to say no or yes, but is a really good kind of phrase. And kind of when you're working with clients, you can say, "Oh, you want that done? Absolutely, I can do that, but it's going to impact our timeline in this way. Do you still want to do that?" Right? Just getting confirmation that, changes have consequences, changes have impact, and making sure you communicate that up front. Then the person might just be like, "Oh, that is actually not that big of a deal. Let's just move forward." So we hit our timeline, and then you just, saved yourself a weekend of maybe work.
Yeah. What were some of the most difficult clients you ever worked with, and how did you navigate that for yourself and your team?
You know, every difficult client that I worked for, typically it was more on the project management side. It wasn't the technical. It wasn't a technical person saying thing wrong, or this HTML or the CSS or this JavaScript doesn't work how I'd expect it to. That rarely was ever the case. It was always project management timelines and the expectation that there was more in the project than what was fulfilled. So, like the way that I typically handled those situations, where I just would revert back to the SOW or the scope of work that was agreed upon, and then also just being like hyper vigilant when something is getting like scope creep is happening, and just addressing it in the moment. Ignoring it or expecting someone else to address it or for it to go away is like a lesson you learn the hard way in the agency world, and just like removing the emotion from it a little bit and just being very candid with people is like a muscle that is very difficult to strengthen. But like, even when you're not in the agency world, like being very direct and saying exactly what you want and your expectations is good, because everybody can get on that same page. But it's not comfortable to do sometimes.
And I think one of the fears is often like, what if they fire us, or what if they
Right.
get angry at us? Did you find when you were direct with these companies who were hiring your agency, did they get upset? Were they eager to fire your agency, or were they more open to your pushback?
I would say more open to pushback. These are the people that you typically run into with problems. It's not just you. Like, it's very rarely just the agency that they have issues with. It's oftentimes someone who's just kind of difficult to work with, but they're difficult to work with in all regards, in the organization, other agencies around. So they're very much so just kind of prone to being with you. So like, found, 9 times out of the 10, pushback is very welcomed and received, and they almost just appreciate it. They're just like, oh, okay, like, thank you for keeping us on track, and that like letting us know that this is just going to derail us, and like, now we're all aligned and stuff. And then the very rare few who pushback just isn't taken very well. It's probably just not a good fit. And in the agency world, sometimes you just got to partner or separate ways with certain clients, and it's healthy for everybody. It's healthy for the client because they're obviously not getting the service that they expected, and it's healthy for the consultants in the company because it maintains the culture and it protects your people. Which, if you're in a leadership perspective, they'll appreciate that from you. And then if you're like boots on the ground, you're just thankful that you're not having to work with someone that just isn't aligned to your goals and objectives.
Would you ever start your own agency?
I've thought about it so many times, and I will probably never start my own agency. No.
Why so?
I told my boss at the agency that I just came from. I was the VP of marketing ops, and he of course was the CEO and owner. And I always reminded him, I'm like, I never want your job. I never want your job. I don't like you probably won't like me saying this, Nate, because you have an accounting background, but I don't like the accounting and like the human resources aspects of running a business. So like, if I were to ever own a business, I would probably have like a really talented ops person, or maybe even hire a CEO to run the business side of the business. But I enjoyed getting my hands dirty and building things too much to be able to step up to a level where I'm communicating to the board and like managing people who manage people who manage people. Like, I don't know, that doesn't sound fun to me.
That's fair. It is interesting, isn't it? How even when you go deep into, let's say, a marketing automation agency, the skill set you need isn't actually necessarily marketing automation. It's more hiring the right people, managing finances, managing the board.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's
Yep.
fascinating. Speaking of SaaS Secret, which I think was that previous agency where you're VP of marketing ops.
SaaSend.
SaaSend. Thank you. Speaking of SaaSend.
Yeah.
What is the biggest misconception clients have about digital transformation?
Well, it feels like they think tools are going to solve all their problems. Like, if I just buy this marketing automation tool versus having this one, it's going to solve all of my problems. Found it's very rarely a tool or a process issue. It's often a people issue. It's sales goes rogue and creates contacts and imports lists into Pardot. They're gonna do the exact same thing to Marketo, right? So people are oftentimes the area of opportunity to like align with, and it's disalignment between marketing, sales, operations that kind of causes conflict. So the biggest misconception I would say would be they think tools are going to solve all of their problems.
That is really interesting. I've already mentioned this before, the human side of MarkOps.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the way to solve for this? Are you able to solve it as an external consultant, or does it require the internal company make a big change?
I think, well, I think you can solve it internally, or if you're a consultant, right? It's being very non-emotional when it comes to listening to teams and departments, right? So as a consultant, I can either confirm a person's opinion or not and say, hey, look, the direction you want to go is correct. And like, I'm validating that, which oftentimes I work with someone, there's like, oh my goodness, thank you so much for like validating my opinion. I thought I was going crazy because, so-and-so in this other department told me that wasn't the right, place to go. But whether or not one person thinks they're going in the right direction, really, and even if they are headed in the right direction, it just doesn't matter if everyone else in the organization isn't aligned. So oftentimes I have to pull the stakeholders together into a room and say, this is the end goal that we're trying to achieve. Let's find the best path forward that is going to impact each team and department negatively the least amount of time. But we want to make sure that everyone is on board and it's going in the right direction. So like being that third party who can kind of get everyone in the room is oftentimes like the simplest solution.
Fair. I was reading a very interesting article about Palantir, the tech consulting company, and the person who's writing it, I forget the exact timeline, but saying something like they'd have a 6-week integration with the client, and they'd probably spend 4 to 5 of those weeks just getting alignment with all the stakeholders to have all the data in one place. And then the thing that people thought they were hiring them for, which is actually analyzing the data, they'd only be able to do in the last week or 2 weeks, which struck me as strongly accurate. A lot of this data is very siloed. It's very political. I don't necessarily want to share the stuff I have with this consultant who I'm afraid might replace my job. So it seems like that human side, again, becomes really, really important.
Yeah.
When you were at Cheshire Impact, you did something like 35 integrations in 1 year.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
Yeah. Well, I must have done probably another 35 at Sisens. There were a lot of integrations. I learned how to do integrations at Chesh. That was tricky. So at the time, I was coming from Pardot when I worked with you, and then I moved to I worked for a credit union that used so then I knew both, which at the time 10 years ago was kind of rare, right? Like just to know one marketing automation tool, let alone two. So they hired me to build the migration strategy from Pardot to Marketo. So that was wild. It's having understanding the process of operations when it comes to integrations and systems and tools was kind of key. So knowing that you can't create an email if you don't have an email template. You can't create an email template if you don't have all the variable fields. So there's an order to migrating systems. You have to have the fields in there. You have to have the data in there in order to create the email template, and you can't create an email unless the email template's there. And then you have to have the lists, and the lists can't exist because with the logic if the fields aren't created. So learning that process and kind of getting that down and creating operational efficiency for moving from one system to another, that was also a really good lesson learned, especially in ops, because that can be translated to just all aspects of the business.
Have you ever played computer games like Factorio?
No, I have not. The only video game that I ever got into was Rocket League. And for those who know that game, you're my people. But no, I never really got into video games.
It strikes me as how similar the sort of marketing operations is to gaming, especially something like Factorio, where you have to build this in order to build that, in order to build this, and you automate things. It's interesting how much gaming often reflects real life to a certain degree.
Yeah, yeah. I find that like I love it during the workday, but like I kind of unplug during like my free time. So like you won't find me building CRM integrations in my free time. I am probably out in the middle of nowhere in the woods with a campfire and a tent and my dog. So that's probably what I don't do a lot of gaming.
That was something else I wanted to talk with you about.
Oh
I
yeah?
know you are very much an outdoors person.
Uh-huh.
How does that integrate with your digital presence and digital work?
Yeah, it doesn't, which is great. Like I don't
Just two
want
different worlds.
Well, it is completely two different worlds. Now, I do have a Starlink. So, like, when I'm out there camping, I do have high speed internet. Like, I can do the Netflixes and stuff. So, but like, there are rules. I can't have that on like all the time. Like, I'm not on my computer the entire time. So, I'm definitely a techie. I do love technology and I do have a lot of technology. But I don't know. And you have to have balance. And like, if you're constantly behind the screen 24/7, that's just a recipe for disaster. So, setting personal boundaries and just knowing what energizes you and kind of what drains is key. So, no, I'm not, building a whole bunch of really cool technology in my free time. Typically, I do that from 9 to 5.
I love that. Speaking of balance, you have a lot of things you're doing. You have your coffee chats that you give to the community.
Mm,
You have LinkedIn posts. They're fantastic. You
yep.
have your actual job. You have camping. How do you balance all these different things in one life?
Yeah. So camping is my time off. So I definitely, try to dedicate some time throughout the year to like, take some time off. But I mean, I do calendar blocks. I don't know if that's something that you do, but like I dedicate certain days to working on different projects. And then I'll even section out time on my calendar for working on specific projects. So I did that at the agency simply because people would book time with me over while I was trying to work on something. So if I didn't block it off on my calendar to say like I would need 3 hours to get this thing done, and that needs to be uninterrupted 3 hours, right? So I learned from working at the agency that like if I do that, people are a lot more respectful with your time. Not even respectful, like they just don't know. And then my inclination to always say yes. I always want to help, but it protects my calendar is protected from me mostly, and then also other people. So if they will see sections of the time to actually reach out to me, and then I also dedicate Friday, which is the least productive day of the week, to actually for like internal meetings. So I try to do all of my internal meetings
Smart.
on Friday, make that kind of like the fun day, if you will. If you're a manager, one-on-ones happen on Fridays. All the casual conversations happen on Fridays. And then the meat of what I work on during the day typically is between Tuesdays and Thursdays.
It's interesting. Okay, so getting even more tactical,
Mm-hmm.
you are a manager. You have people working on your team,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also a maker in this like manager maker time
Yeah.
analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do
Like
you
player
keep the
coach.
people on your team unblocked throughout the week if you're only meeting with them on Friday?
They can reach out to me anytime during the week. It's not just Fridays. So it depends actually. So whenever when I was at Send for an example, I would actually ask the person what they needed. So I would say, here are your options. We can meet twice a week, and we can meet at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week, once a week, bi-weekly, or once a month. And they get to pick how often that they actually meet with me. So one person, especially new hires, I would probably meet with like twice a week, maybe even 3 times a week. But then as they kind of grow and mature in their roles, that gets shifted. So it moves maybe from like hands-on early on. And then, once they're here for like 4 or 5 months, they got their feet underneath of them. And they're just like, hey, look, I'm a very self-efficient person. I don't need to meet with you every week. Then we would do at minimum, I did out of a rule. I had at least meet at least once a month, was like the most lenient version. So yeah, they could just kind of pick whatever would work. And then I did like office hours as well during the week. So I had a dedicated block where anyone could join that calendar and come with problems and solutions that they need help worked on.
Okay, so going deeper on these people who are just getting started early in their career, they're
Mhm.
meeting up to 3 times a week.
Yeah.
What does your coaching of these people look like?
I have a template. I'd have to find it and send it to you. But basically, it was three things that you help on this week. And I worded it very specifically because I didn't want someone feeling bad for needing help, right? So like, do you need help with anything this week is a very different conversation than what do you need help with this week, right? One's an assumption that there's something that they need help with, which almost everybody does. And the other one is basically like, well, do you have everything taken care of or do you need help? Right. Um, and then there was, what are three things that you learned from this week? And then what are three things that were wins? And I typically ended on the wins side, right? So what do you need help with? What were your learnings? And then, you know, what went well, right? And then finishing on that. And I would also do an element of that actually on team calls as well as a group.
Love that. And if someone is behind on a project,
Mm-hmm.
how do you help them to get back on track?
I delete as much as I can from that calendar. Like you need to be ruthless with your calendar and time. I would offer to take meetings from them, even client meetings, if it's someone getting caught up on their like to-do list. So absolutely, like, hey, look, if you need the time for a one-on-one, you have the power to cancel that, right? Me, your manager, I'm not going to be the one who cancels it, but you should feel empowered to say, hey, look, I got it this week. Like where you can help me is by not taking up 35 minutes of my day, right? So removing as many roadblocks as possible and just protecting the team.
Love that. I love that it sounds like you're balancing both empowering them and also giving them the expectation of this is your responsibility to do, but
Yeah.
then giving them a set of options of here's how I can actually help beyond
Right.
just like, hey, I'm here to help, but really here's how I can help you.
Yeah. And then we so we also had coaches and like project management coaches. So there were some coaches that like they could tap for specific needs. If like we had a communications coach, for an example, with how to deal with difficult problems and how to communicate effectively. Yeah, there's a lot of like tools and resources, but mostly it's just, making sure that you have a culture where people can come to you if they have issues and they don't feel bad about bringing those up. Like if you can build that culture of just constantly learning and being like, hey, look, I don't know how to do this thing. How better? Then you're going to win as a team. But if someone's scared of bringing up the bad and the problems, then it will just foster more and more problems.
How do you keep that culture consistent? At least in my mind, an agency often grows very quickly. You bring on a new big client, you've got to bring on a bunch of new people to serve that client. How do you keep the culture consistent?
Yeah, early on, we didn't have a culture committee, but we actually did have a culture committee later on when we grew. So like we morphed a little bit where we had a great culture. We sensed that it actually was slipping a little bit. And then we created a culture committee with a person from every team and department. And basically their job was to come up with ideas throughout the year to do. So one thing that we did was we got together every year as a team. So we picked like different locations, Mexico, different parts of the United States. The committee has decided that, and then they also would raise like a red flag with like, hey, look, we're not really meeting as a team together as much as we should. Like we're not really communicating. Like they would just bring up different things. So if you can create a culture committee, make sure it's very diverse amongst all the different teams from sales to your interns, and make sure everyone has a voice. And like that's a good way to tackle it. But you can't force a culture from like the top down. It has to come from the bottom up.
That is very fair. I think what I've noticed is you cannot force the culture from the top down, but you can very easily break it from the top down.
Oh yeah.
So the role of the senior leadership is how do you keep that culture or enable the culture that people are building?
Yeah. Enablement is really where it is, and enabling the team as much as possible and getting out of their way is key. But it's very easy to break trust. It's much harder to get it back.
Okay, so we've talked about how you would help the younger employees who are getting started in their career. What about those who are more experienced? You're meeting with them once a month.
Yeah.
How are you coaching these folks?
Well, it becomes less about how-tos, right? Because oftentimes they do the how-tos a lot better than you do, right? Like if you're like in my role at the time, I actually worked with Brandon. Brandon was on the team. Yeah, he was on my team over at SSN too. Like Brandon was so much smarter than me. Like he was so much better when it came to the technical piece of building things. So like he didn't need help with like infrastructure or building business infrastructure and connecting the tools like that. He got it. Oftentimes the problems shift a little bit. So I'm not talking about Brandon specifically now, but when it comes to working with people and politics, and then also making sure that there's a path to something next, right? So what is their goal? Normally, if you're a seasoned person, you might want to grow in your career and go and do different things and maybe manage people yourselves. Like that's the next big thing. So I can work on that with them. Or sometimes they don't want to manage a team and people. They're happy just being the doer, and they're happy being really, really good at what they do. And then then my job is to basically protect them, make sure they're working on the projects that energize them, and make sure that you're paying them fairly. All because someone doesn't want to manage people does not mean they should be growing in their career and growing in their salary, and growing in that way.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Taking a sharp right turn.
Okay.
You've written about email and email metrics and how we should move beyond just opens and clicks in email
Yes.
tracking.
Yep.
How would you change the way people look at email measurement?
I would say it should just be moved to conversion or whatever the goal is, right? So whatever the end goal is for that email, let's just use a very simple example. And let's say we want to do a webinar registration. The success of that email or the failure of that email should be if someone registered for the webinar. I should look with Apple and all the different email service providers, and now AI probably going through all of these emails, opening, clicking them. In the security space, like the network security space, it's very untrustworthy whether or not things are actually being opened or clicked by a person. So depending on what industry, and that's probably a bigger issue or not. But I just don't think you should be measuring it. I actually think you should be measuring it by whatever the end goal is. Conversions. You can look at open rates, click-through rates, right? Open rates is great to maybe dictate one subject line better than another subject line, but you have to trust the data.
Fair. So it's maybe less of open rates and click-through rates are bad metrics and more of they're just not trustworthy metrics in today's environment.
They're not something that you should massive business decisions on. Like I wouldn't say go to a marketing team and be like, oh, if you just get like 3 more percentage points up, then like you've done your job. Like you need to be very aware of just how like different email service providers treat open rates and click-through rates. And then on the conversion side, your job doesn't really end there. Like you still have to validate that form submission is happening from a person and it's not just like junk data or a bot, right? So, yeah, more downstream metrics I think are going to become more the commonplace for testing.
Which that's another piece I'm really curious about. I have done a little bit of dabbling in email newsletters and sort of thing. And I've noticed in recent years, there's a lot more bots that seem to be getting involved.
Mm-hmm.
How do you clean your data efficiently?
Yeah, so like there's preemptive stuff that you can do. So like you can do like the honeypots and the captchas and stuff to kind of prevent it. But I would spend very little energy actually keeping the form from being submitted. And I spend more of my energy on the other side. So once the data comes in, to your question is what do you do with that data? I love email verification systems, things like Brightly, Never Bounce. Those are really good tools. You can basically take an email address, push it up against their API, or integrate it with whatever tool that you're using. It'll validate it. It'll come back with, valid or invalid, maybe throwaway or junk type email status, and then just use that status to kind of clean up your database. And if you don't want to integrate it, that's okay. I would recommend you use one of those tools like once a quarter or maybe even once a year. Just push your database through it, because getting those removed from your inbox will just help your your true open rate, click-through rates, and conversion rates, because it won't be junked up from emails that don't do anything.
And if I understand correctly, that also would help with deliverability, right? If you're sending only to real email.
I mean, you'd get a truer picture of all of your metrics, but yes, deliverability would be one, because if 10% of your inbox is junk emails that someone just made up, like abc123 at noreply.com, then like when you send that email to the inbox, that's going to be one less email that actually either gets delivered. And then also for those really old emails that maybe were valid at one time, but like aren't anymore, it's going to impact your open rate and your click-through rate because that person isn't going to have an opportunity to actually open or click. So yes, cleaning your data is always a good thing.
Does it change your deliverability to those real emails, or it just means you're not delivering to people who are no longer checking their inbox?
You know, I don't think it's going to impact it. I would say what will impact your deliverability is if you start spamming people who are human and they mark it and they flag your email as spam. That will impact it. Or if you didn't set up your, your SPF record or your DNS settings, like that will impact deliverability. But like having your database full of junk leads probably wouldn't impact deliverability to the ones that are valid, but it would impact the metric number, right? It might say 90% deliverability, but most marketing automation tools will probably unsubscribe them after, so many hard bounces or soft bounces.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Another piece that came up for me as you're talking is there are a lot of tools. I think you mentioned just 2 tools that can help to remove bad email addresses.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a bit overwhelming. There's so many tools out there. Each one you have to pay for separately. How do you bring this idea of simplification that you've been talking about to such a complicated space?
So you don't need to necessarily purchase a tool if you're not in a place to purchase a tool. Whatever system you use to send emails typically will give you a report of delivered, non-delivered, hard bounce, soft bounce. So really it's just being vigilant on taking action on the data that it gives you on those records and deleting them and cleaning them up and being, regular. The problem is nobody has time for that. Every email send doesn't do, post-mortem on that email and then, clean up all your records. That would be amazing to have that much time, but it's unrealistic. So using these tools kind of at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter would be great, but, it's not something you have to do. A lot of tools do the same thing. Pick one that you're comfortable with and is simple and don't over-engineer it.
So getting very tactical, let's say I'm a small e-commerce startup. I sell like tissue paper.
Sure.
What stack of market operations should I consider adopting?
I mean, the simplest one would probably just be Snag HubSpot, right? Snag HubSpot as like maybe your CRM. You could do Marketing Hub as your marketing automation tool or something like MailChimp might be fine if you're a small e-commerce business. BigCommerce might be good for your actual sales platform. You can put a shop and stuff up on that and customize it a little bit. BigCommerce and between BigCommerce and HubSpot, I would think you'd probably be able to cover most of your technology.
Interesting. So I could just get those 2, and that would be
so
a
those
sufficient
2 would
start.
give you email, CRM. It would give you your online marketplace. I think BigCommerce could also handle like your payment processing and like all of that and returns and exchanges and stuff. So, those 2 is where I would probably start. HubSpot being the big one, I think, for SMB customers looking to start out with CRM and marketing automation.
That is very, very, very simple. Let's say my company is doing very well. I'm starting to grow. I've got like $10,000 a month in sales. What would you add to that stack next?
It's add or replace. I would say Salesforce is kind of the king of when it comes to enterprise customability. You start to wander into territory like CPQ when it comes to like creating complex payments schedules and getting different SKUs and discounts and promotion codes. So I think Salesforce would probably be like the enterprise version of a CRM. And then I would maybe just keep HubSpot for your marketing automation platform or do Marketing Cloud on the Salesforce side. And then, you get into like the NetSuites of the world for, and complication, compliance and regulations, because not all payment processors work globally. So you start to have to worry about those versus just North America.
I love this. Okay, so backing up, I heard a word I don't know, CPQ. What is CPQ?
CPQ basically allows you to create and bill invoices kind of like really complicated. So like if you want to take a annual contract and chop it up into like 4 invoices with your SKU library, and also have like different payment schedules and like be compliant. It basically allows you to basically do all of that within Salesforce, versus Salesforce out of the box would be like create an opportunity, put $1 value on it, and then it pretty much stops there. CPQ picks that up and actually creates like the invoices, and then works with payment processors to actually send those invoices and collect payment, and owns that entire process.
Fair. One thing that I've noticed in my very limited interactions with things like Salesforce is they seem to have a lot of point and click configuration. There's a lot of visual interfaces, which makes sense for non-technical audiences. But when you look at things that AI can help with, very often it's text-based. Is it possible to do automation in Salesforce, HubSpot, etc., using text, or do you need to do that configuration visually?
Say we're not there yet with AI when it comes to like text. I think that HubSpot probably is the one who's in the leader when it comes to implementing AI solutions with like prompt-based changes, right? Like, hey, upload this list, add them to this campaign. You can, include a CSV, and like HubSpot can kind of do that pretty well. But right now, it's all point and click configuration within the platform. I don't there. I think that you're probably like 5 years ahead of the way that you're thinking about that, like how AI is going to influence system configuration at the API level, starting to dabble with that.
And let's say someone like myself is a bit overeager on what AI can do, or to say, why am I getting a HubSpot? Can I just have AI build this for me directly? What would you say to that person?
Infrastructure, right? Like OpenAI isn't going to give you the domain. It's not going to set up the infrastructure for you. You still need that, right? So you still need the base infrastructure even to have it, GPT be effective. So of that, you want to use it for everything, but it's not. It's going to guide you how to build a thing. It's going to give you kind of like the nails and the lumber for it, but at the end of the day, you still need to build a house, and like you need to like put it together somewhere, right? So OpenAI is just not going to do that, and they're going to stay out of that business too. I don't think they are. They're going to get into the licensing it out for other tools to use and integrate and stuff, which is exciting. They're not going to be the one-stop shop, I don't think, for like SaaS tools.
Quite reasonable. Interesting. Going to a slightly different direction, you spent some time at a credit union.
I did,
regulated, very regulated industry.
Uh-huh.
What was that like doing marketing operations in such a regulated space?
Oh my gosh, it was so boring. It was fun in the sense that credit unions are very connected to the community, and they do community events and they give back, and like that was amazing. There was a big sense of community, and like what we do is for the members of the credit union, which was great. That was kind of like a little of a mind shift from SaaS. We think customers versus members. But it was very boring. Like every email basically needed to go through Dick's team and our legal team to go through the fine print of every single email. And oftentimes the fine print was bigger than the email itself for like pre-qualifications emails and stuff like that. So it was very boring. It moved very slow. They didn't really adapt very easily. But I learned Marketo, which was one big plus that came out of it.
That is a very big plus.
Yeah.
From a regulated industry standpoint, how much of the slow development was due to actual regulations, and how much was due to perceived regulations or just the slowness of the industry?
Question. Probably more perceived regulations. There's so much we could have done infrastructure wise and systems, just from the systems that we had, right? And I'm not even talking about buying something new, which would be a whole problem and an ordeal to go through. But like even just using Marketo at the time of like the way that we built we nurture campaigns. We would just do smart campaigns. Like, why don't we do nurture campaigns? It's like, oh, well, we like, plan that out and like, build it and do that like new module that nobody wanted to touch or understand. So perceived probably regulations or perceived like change was very scary, kind of the financial industry, but I would also say like network security industry. It was also very scary. So the law and like the rules themselves, I would say, slowed us down a little bit. It was mostly like the mindset of like, we'll just do it the way that we've always done it, probably got in the way more.
To me, when I see something like that, where it's like, this is a great company that's doing good for its community, but it's using ancient technology, the temptation is, oh, let me go and fix this. And maybe I can like create a company that fixes it at scale for multiple credit unions across the country.
Mm-hmm.
Why would that not work?
Because you'd probably replace 10% of staff. So like the people you want to help are also the people who you'd likely be replacing. And that I don't think would be received very well. Like it's kind of a catch-22. It's like, oh, you can do all this amazing stuff. We're going to simplify the process. That also means that, Mary Jane in compliance is going to lose her job because you're building a ChatGPT that is going to review contracts at lightning speed over her, right? So like, that's just one example, but it's not fun building, efficiencies and then seeing, jobs affected negatively because of that.
Fair. That's fair. How would you, if you were, let's say, in charge of the credit union and you wanted to automate efficiently, but you didn't want to cost these people their jobs?
Yep.
Where would you put these people?
Where would I put them? I wouldn't. I would probably let them go. Honestly, like you have to be in a growth mindset, and not everybody is, right? So I think that every person has to have an opportunity to, and this of course is like the startup person in me, not the credit union person, right? I'm a very different person than I was then. You have to have a growth mindset, and you have to be with a certain amount of risk, right? But balanced depending on what industry you're in, right? Financial, so you're the amount that you should be open up to is probably a little bit less than most businesses livelihoods. Right? So, but I would say you need to be open to change, and you need to be at least open to like looking for alternatives. And if you're not, and you're just saying no because that's the way you've always been done it, then I don't want to work with that type of person. And if I'm in some sort of leadership position, that's probably the first person that I'm going to be getting rid of and replacing them with someone who is at least curious and wants to build for the future and not just do it because that's what they've always been doing.
Yeah, which is important. It's interesting to me how in many industries, if you don't build the future, someone else will build it for you.
Yes.
But then there are certain industries, and credit unions are probably one of them, where you have this regulatory capture that it's very hard to become a new credit union. Therefore, you can sort of be a subpar credit union and continue to exist for a long period of time before
for now
replaces.
I think that there will be some industries that will probably be taken out from AI. The world around them is going to adapt much quicker than certain companies and industries, and they will fail because of it. Stock comes to mind, right? Stock photography sites with the rise of AI image generation and video generation. Coca-Cola just released their holiday video that was generated by AI, right? Like you need to buy iStock photography anymore, right? So you've got to find ways to keep up, otherwise, like you mentioned, the world around you is going to move past.
It's an exciting time, but also a challenging time.
Yeah.
Going deeper into the human side of MarTech, because I think this is really, really an important area. One of the things you've mentioned is that a lot of problems can be solved by walking across the room. Where have you seen that be most effective in your career?
Probably alignment between sales and marketing. I would say, like, One thing that we did at a business called Firemon, which is a network security company, another highly regulated business, we would have alignment meetings between marketing and sales. Sales would do morning stand-ups, and we called it the fishbowl because it was just a room surrounded by glass. Sales and the BDRs would stand up and they would talk about their opportunities and life cycle, what worked and what didn't work, the conversations that they were happening. Marketing would sometimes just walk over there and join those conversations, or at least listen in. And that helped us understand who our ICP is, how our ICP was changing. And then like if a program was working or not working, we heard it from them first. We could look at the data, we could wait until an opportunity was close lost, and we could look at the close lost reasons, but often we could just have a conversation, and like the boots on the ground BDRs, they could give us real-time feedback, and we could keep up with the change much faster than waiting for the data to come in.
How do you address the age-old problem of sales saying we're failing because marketing isn't giving us good enough leads, and marketing saying we're giving great leads, but sales isn't closing them?
Sure. Yeah. I don't think marketing should be measured by MQLs. I think that is horrible. It does a disservice to marketing, and it does a disservice to sales. Absolutely do not measure marketing by MQLs. It's
and MQLs, for those who don't know the term.
Marketing qualified leads. Yeah. Oftentimes is defined by some sort of score that marketing puts up against a record. And to hit that score threshold, you have to do something like be active on the website, have a certain job title, work for a certain size company, and all of that kind of fits into an ICP, which outputs a score. The problem is marketing can manipulate that. They can come to the end of the quarter and they're not hitting their MQL goal. They just tweak that threshold just a little bit, and then boom, they've hit their MQL goal, and they're sending less and less qualified records over to sales. So how to be measured? I think that marketing should be aligned to sales. I think BDRs, ISRs, whatever your inbound reps are on the sales side should actually report into marketing. And marketing should be measured by the quality of sales accepted leads or sales qualified leads that marketing sends them. So if they are not qualified or accepted from sales, that's the number that marketing should care about.
Interesting. So moving further down the funnel, which makes sense, but then also moving the inbound sales reps into the marketing org.
I think they should report to
give marketing control.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting, which solves for both problems. On the one hand, if you move further down the funnel, marketing can complain that I don't control this part of the funnel. Why should I be scored on it?
Exactly.
But if you move the folks in,
they're responsible. Like they're because they report to marketing, and then you also force the alignment between the sales personalities and marketing because sales fits directly into marketing. And then the communication that you need to worry about at that point is when the BDRs or the ISRs book meetings and they've qualified the record and they pull on the salesperson, that transition happens. But at that point, you can pass the baton a lot faster than I think, qualifying a record that shouldn't be qualified, giving it to sales, and then gaslighting them into thinking that it is a high quality record when it's not.
And let's say you're coming into a company in one of your agency days that has a bad relationship between marketing and sales. How would you go about fixing that?
I would probably dig in a little bit why they don't have a good relationship. Is it personality conflicts? Is it the data? Is it the process? Once you can unpack that, you can get a little bit deeper. Typically, it's specific campaign that sales kind of got burnt about, and then ever since then, they just haven't wanted to work with marketing. If that's the case, then it's trust, and you have to build that trust back. So that means getting the key stakeholders in the room, agreeing upon together what your ICP is, and then agreeing on what that score threshold is, and depending on where the BDRs and stuff sit, working with them and making sure that like, hey, look, we agreed upon this ICP. Marketing found someone with that ICP. They sent them to you, and then you disqualified it. Why are you disqualifying leads? We need to understand that, and then very quickly, sales leadership might realize it's a sales problem, or you might unpack that it's truly a marketing problem, and the agreed upon definitions are not being followed somewhere, either on the marketing side or the sales side. and then, you can escalate it up to whatever senior leader that you need to address it with your CMO or the VP of sales or whoever it might be.
It's interesting how in the worst case, marketing and sales can become essentially tossing leads over a fence and never seeing what happens on the other side of the fence. But what you're describing is basically break down that fence and see into both sides and talk to each other.
You have to. Like you're working together for a common good, right? So if one team is successful but the other team isn't, like, you're bailing water out of the ship a little bit, right? But like at the end of the day, you're in the ship together, and if it sinks, both departments are going to go down.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about your current role.
Yeah.
About 6 months ago, you moved into Tray.ai. What led you to take on this new opportunity?
Yeah, so I was actually a Tray customer for 8 years. So I've been in my role for almost 4 months, I think. So less than 6 months, customer for over 8 years. And I ended up, of course, putting my time at the agency. It's a lot of work. And then I just decided I would like to go into an in-house role. And then when they heard that I was looking, they kind of jumped at the bit to snag me up. So yeah, I joined the Tray team about 4 months ago, and it's a great fit. It's like a really good in-house role for me because I get to solve different problems every day, given that they're in the iPaaS space and they integrate with a bunch of different tools. So I still get to scratch that itch of like building really cool new stuff as different technology comes up, like OpenAI and ChatGPT.
And really quickly, for those who don't know, iPaaS means
integration platform as a service. So you basically think of connecting your tools. If there's no native integration, you have an iPaaS or an integration tool that can connect those two tools. And that kind of automation integration space is the iPaaS space.
If we were to go back to our example of this e-commerce company that's selling tissue, they're doing $10,000 a month in sales.
Yeah.
How would they use Tray.ai?
Yeah. So let's say they had QuickBooks, right, as their, invoice generation and payment kind of capture process, right? So they might have BigCommerce, which is their store, and then when someone purchases something, you want to send them an invoice. So BigCommerce purchase comes in, you can pick up that that product being purchased from BigCommerce, and then you can send it to QuickBooks via an integration tool like Tray. And then you can generate the invoice and you can send that invoice all within Tray. And then, you don't have to worry about manually going into QuickBooks, creating it, copying and pasting all that data over. When there might not be a native integration, you can leverage Tray to make that connection and automate that process.
So essentially connect anything. And if I understand correctly, also inject some AI during that connection.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you can use AI and layer that on into the process if you'd like. So, you can check to see if, there's a duplicate account or a contact within, let's say, QuickBooks. And then, you can feed all of that data in your criteria for which one should maybe get deleted. Let AI make that decision and then maybe delete it. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can layer in AI within automation. It's crazy how much you can do.
And I saw in one of your previous podcasts, you were indeed talking about Tray.ai before you worked there. Mm-hmm. What have been some of the favorite things you've built in those 8 years using it?
Yeah, I built something literally today, or it was like the last couple of months. That's really interesting. So basically what I did was I built a chat interface powered by iPaaS. So plugging into all the different tools that you have and then putting a chat type interface in front of it where you can push and pull data through different APIs, like ChatGPT. But ChatGPT doesn't have access to your Salesforce account, your HubSpot account, your actual data to actually have that context and grounding for whatever the responses that it comes back with. I've been building something on the Tray platform that is a chat type interface for iPaaS that plugs into these different tools. So it's been really interesting playing with it. But yeah, that'd probably be my favorite thing so far.
Is this the one I heard about where you automated tech support for your mom?
No, that was something else. Something else I did. I did do that. I had a Twilio integration with ChatGPT. So she would text a phone number, and ChatGPT would respond back to her text. Yeah, that's pretty good.
I love that. There's so much you can automate in life that just makes your life, and also in this case, someone else's life, so much easier, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
It's very,
But
very
the
exciting.
role that we play is builders and ops people. For those ops people who might be listening, is we have to make it easy, and we have to have it simplified down to where people want to use it, right? So like that's what I'm tasked with as an ops person, someone who's technical but need to build the technical infrastructure in a way that scales that people can use. So
Yeah.
like my mother
I think
with texting.
I think for me, what I find most exciting about this area of automation is you really get to be a bridge. You're the bridge between the customer who knows what they want
Yep.
and the technology that the customer doesn't understand how it works. They just want it to do the thing they need.
Right.
But if you can truly understand the customer
Yep.
and truly understand the technology, you can bridge the two. They're
Yep.
very different skills. One is almost UXR of understanding what does this, like user researcher, what does this person want? What is easy to them? And then the other is very technical, almost engineering of how do I build this thing?
Yeah.
And
It's a
the idea is
balance.
you bridge both of those.
Yeah, it's hard. And then having people skills to be able to communicate it effectively and get people to adopt it, and being able to take in and change and modify and take feedback well. It's a process.
Very true. I've definitely encountered that also myself. And once you've built something, it becomes your thing. And it's hard to then take feedback of, oh, this isn't actually very easy for you to use. This
Yeah,
doesn't fit. You want to text it. I built it so you can call it. But look how cool this thing is I built. Why do I have to rebuild it?
exactly. Yeah. Well, you don't have to rebuild it like 3 times. Is it really operations work? Yeah.
True. Okay, we're coming to our final speed round of the interview.
Okay.
Now, this is a little area where I throw two options at you. You can pick either one. Feel free to expound on it if you'd like to. But otherwise, this is just a lightning round.
Sure.
No code or custom code?
Low code.
Built out GPT or custom LLM?
Built out GPT.
Build or buy?
Oh gosh, I want to say build. But for most people, probably buy is the better decision. But the builder in me just says build. So that it requires an asterisk. Depends on the situation, but I'll go with build because that's what my heart's telling me to say.
I love it. Tech skills or business acumen?
Business acumen.
Agency or in-house?
Beginning of your career agency, later in your career in-house.
Remote or in-office?
Hybrid.
Speed or perfection?
Speed. But I have a quote. I have a great quote for that. Don't let great get in the way of good. So, perfection is something that my team is always aimed for, but I always told them don't let great get in the way of good because it will keep you from innovating and moving quickly.
Innovation or stability?
Innovation.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to the end of the interview. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we leave?
Yeah, if anyone is curious about learning more about Tray, shoot me an email. I do coffee chats. They're non-salesy coffee chats. And then we also have agent workshops that everyone is welcome to join for free and get your hands on and play with a little bit of AI of some of the stuff that we've been talking about.
And the links to all of that will be in the show notes, so check down below.